This is Greg for Teslafaninsight. Today's Trade Blast slash show is focused on primarily kind of what's happening to the stock market and how that is affecting Tesla and sort of how do you plan all this out given the craziness happening currently. The first thing is just want to thank our Patreon supporters as well as our subscribers. If you like the show, please take time to like and subscribe. So usually we have a trade blast for the day, and then we have our regular show kind of every other day. And we're sort of in a crazy market position now where we've actually been making our trade blasts usually only open to Patreon supporters, public, as well as the show that we might bring on. And we usually do 2 or 3 shows a week, sometimes 5. But we're kind of in a crazy time right now, so I decided that I'll blend our trade blast with our show just for today because I really think today is one of the biggest, perhaps most important days in the stock market that we'll see over the next several years, actually. Um, again, if you like the show, please take time to like to subscribe. Thank our Patreon supporters as well as our subscribers for your support. It definitely makes a difference and is appreciated. Highly recommend that you take time to also hit the bell icon because we do provide information that can be very timely and you need to access it, especially if you want to make sure you save slash make money. And our goal is make sure all of our folks, we create as many millionaires as we can this year or increase net worth in the process is part of what we're about. So we did a show yesterday afternoon and we tried to, what kind of happened yesterday is that it was announced by Italy that they were shutting everything down. So we took that as a stunner because kind of what happens in Europe, if one country does something, it tends to happen in other places. So we're expecting that, you know, this is kind of what's going to happen. The challenge right now is that Tesla is a great company, doing well, everything's cool, even in the coronavirus era. But the problem that's going on right now is that the market's crash is really too much for one company to bear. And so therefore, Tesla is in a very, very tough position right now to sort of keep the stock price up, especially without official company numbers to support analysis. So as we all know, what occurred yesterday in terms of that's big is first we had Italy shut down, and then Mr. Trump announced that he's shutting 30 days down inbound flights from Europe, and the combination is pretty deadly. I've been keeping an eye on Tesla this morning. Stock is down approximately $50 in sympathy with the rest of the market. I, you know, I was talking with friends this morning about the circuit breakers. So, meaning that for those of you who don't know it, they do have rules associated with how far down the market is, and the fact that we literally stop trading for a while to allow the market to recover. I think what it ends up doing is if people are selling out anyway, you end up with a delayed action on the selling that might have occurred. And, it's unfortunate, but that's kind of the zone we're in right now. So I wanted to review several items. Number one is that I've shared with you guys that I thought that Tesla's options and messing with even the stock is kind of tough. And one recommendation I made, oh wow, I didn't know US citizens can come back. That's cool. What I wanted to review is I'd recommended that everyone consider, um, uh, uh, I'm catching notes here as well. I'm trying to blend them if they make sense, so I apologize for the delay if you were not on the live feed. So what I wanted to review further here is the fact that um, we have what tends to happen is if one small part of the market is suffering, then people will sort of gravitate over to other parts that are doing okay. The question is, what do people do if one part is suffering badly and that suffering sort of rotates to all these other places. So we've talked about the fact that 25% of the companies that are listed in the markets are oil or oil-related companies. So all those guys are jacked as the price of oil drops in this price war between Saudi Arabia and Russia. The second thing that comes up is kind of how is the coronavirus, which helped create this oil war, affecting other businesses? So, as I shared yesterday, I really thought that there are issues lurking. For example, what happens to hotel companies when they don't have tourists coming in from Europe to occupy those hotels, Walt Disney World, all these different places that they would have come and visit. Then the next question is this company called Cisco that provides food services to these guys. So what if the food is not being delivered? And so you can see how there can be a cascade of sort of issues that lurk there, um, uh, in terms of this whole process. So I don't, you know, nobody knows where it's truly going. For some of my close advisees, I kind of had a conversation this morning. And if you do trade options, I think this is a good time to whip out your dust off your trading skills. It seems like the stock's going to open in the 580s today in the case of Tesla. And I think in terms of where the market is, I don't think everybody that wants to react to what's been going on has had an opportunity to do so. So I expect that I feel like in terms of the downdraft in the short window for the markets, I feel like we're about 40%, maybe 50% of where we're going for the downdraft of the market. And therefore, I feel like something in the 100, 150 point range down is the range at which Tesla is facing right now, given what's happening with the rest of the market and the fact that people are panicking. So, I think that it's still a great company, still a great buy, great stock. For those of you who choose to hold long term, I think things will be fine. Um, the the challenge that I'm seeing right now is just the fact that it's painful to see all that value disappear. So, I don't think it's a bad time to consider maybe liquidating half your portfolio and then rebuy as things, start to finally settle down. If you're not doing that because of you might get hit with a big tax bill or something like that, another route is maybe pick up, you know, puts to the equivalent of about 5 to 7% of your portfolio as an insurance hedge against everything that's going on right now on the downside. Um, you know, I would say that big problem right now is there's no clear articulation of when the bloodletting is going to end. And so as a result, I just think that there's the potential that the market, keeps floating on bad news that keeps coming out and the fact that there doesn't seem to be an efficient way to deal with it. And once we seem to have some bad news, the badder news seems to come. So I was kind of stunned to learn the NBA was actually suspending games after one player tested positive. But we're basically in a mode now where it just seems like the newest bad news keeps popping up. I went to Stanford. I just looked at the Stanford Daily. It was announced at the university for most classes is asking students to pack up and leave the dorms. And they'll be doing their classes remotely. And so that's how things are going to be handled for next semester. So there's just a large number of places and entities that are negatively impacted by what's going on with Corona and the lack of clarity. Um, Donovan Small just made a comment regarding the fact that it seems strange that Mr. Trump had chosen to not ban Britain. And strangely enough, I was born in Jamaica and I'm a US citizen, but I keep an eye on the papers down there and just learned that they have their first corona patient. And that individual actually came from England. And now they're quarantining the family and they have to go back to that person's home and figure out what they're going to do. So it's kind of interesting that the US / Mr. Trump has elected not to put restrictions on British travel in this case. So the other question that I'm kind of stunned by, I don't get about this whole thing, is if you look in China, there's there's an interesting situation happening where you can't move around in airports or even in public spaces in China without heavily clad individuals running tests on you to determine if you're running a high temperature or things of that nature. And I'm just really stunned to see America still in the mode where if you're in the airport and you're traveling between places, you're not subject to a mandatory temperature check to determine if you might have conditions that could get worse later and infect a lot more people. So it kind of feels like America's plan of response is in the uh, you know delay until it becomes a huge problem, and then once it's a huge problem, you can't really get that back in the bottle. So I'm kind of worried about how we're in the United States we're responding to this whole thing right now. Um, uh, yeah. Something funny that's happening is that Jim just pointed out that after I told him to get out yesterday, he liquidated half his portfolio successfully. Congratulations on that. This really goes to show you should hit the bell icon and make sure that when I'm going to put a show up, that you guys heed what that subject matter might be. So, uh, I see the Graham Brown just pointed out that temperature checks in the airport may not be effective. Um, you know, because people are asymptomatic and while they're still, um, you know, doing their thing, I just think that it feels good to me because I see them then doing it in China, and it seems to make sense that you might have a higher temperature based on an incoming flu of any type. So uh, it won't be effective in asymptomatic cases, but the way this thing is going, it seems like 3 or 4 extra people that were known to be an issue before they knew it, in the form of a temperature showing up, it's just good business. So um, I'm not happy with our response thus far. Um, I am kind of pleased with what I'm hearing from the research universities where, um, uh, uh, wow. And so, anyway, I'm just seeing comments rolling through that I think are interesting. I think there's a comment made by Donovan where you cannot move around China without having your temperature checked as a result. So we'll see what best practices end up being with solving this, but neither here or there. So, to sort of rehash, in my mind, I think we're 40%, maybe 50% of where we're going as a stock market because of these issues. I have to say that I'm blown away by what's going on with oil because Saudi Arabia and Russia choosing to have a price war now with everything else that's going on seems very, very unwise and therefore very, very unprofitable for them and everybody in that industry. So I think it's unfortunate they're battling right now because were they not battling, oil prices could, mellow out and be where they're at. But the way things are going, the discussion by Goldman Sachs of a $20 barrel of oil seems to be what's coming in. And I think 31 was the last I checked. It was 34 yesterday. Had seemed to recover a little bit. So interesting. Um, the other coronavirus thing that comes up is there's Gilead. I think it's NVO. It seems like there are several names out there that are virus drug preparants that are going on. And I think, like one of them, they were up like 40% yesterday. So it just seems like some kind of investment in this space kind of makes sense as well, something to think about. Um, and, I, if you guys have any other comments or thoughts, happy to let them roll on the screen and then we can clip them and put them underneath. I had a really interesting encounter. So we have a show on Sandy Monroe, and from that one short show, there's probably 2 or 3 shows we're going to do with videos, et cetera, from it. Um, I yesterday had a chance to visit General Motors headquarters, in what's called the Renaissance Building here in Detroit, Michigan. And it was a really interesting experience because obviously I've been studying General Motors like crazy for the last year and a half, particularly in terms of their efforts when it comes to electric vehicles, and in general have been unimpressed with what they're doing. Um, as I went to the building, I was sort of intrigued by just the review of the fact that, GM slash Bob Lutz had decided that Tesla was nuts to build their own battery factory when you can just order what you need from Korea and be done with it and have the expertise that the Koreans have relative to battery builds. So the core logic of what they were doing kind of made sense on the front end as Tesla built this factory and is now dominating the space. It's obvious that they've changed their mind and now have decided to build. Um, I was a little bit surprised, sort of disappointed in, Ms. Barra regarding the fact that she took the money from the sale of the European operations and immediately returned that um, to, um, she returned that to shareholders instead of building a battery factory with it 2 years ago. So everybody's saying she's great because they're making a lot of money and they're happy. But I kind of felt like they're giving the company away by not building their own battery factory 2 years ago. So we're now in a situation where it's my feeling that there's to some extent uh, a life or death zone that's going on where, you know, uh, some of these companies may not survive the transition to electric, and they don't have great solutions for being a presence there right now. And the more time you have, obviously, the better. Plus, having your own battery supply would be good as all these people are uh, with competing with each other to try to get batteries from LG or perhaps Samsung. So we're in a very sort of strange time for autos because we know that all those consultants were telling GM you need a battery factory 2, 3 years ago, and they were overruled by executives who want to optimize profit. So I feel like you know the sort of strategic planning folks at GM really let them down. And I was really amazed as I rolled up on the building that it's weird to study a company casually for hours on a monthly basis and then walk up to the building and be able to sort of, see the sign and know the executives making key decisions or standing in the building while you're there. And you're sort of putting sort of fact with fiction. It's a very sort of strange combination that I was experiencing as I was there. Um, I really hope GM makes it because there's a lot of friends and family and so forth that rely on that paycheck. And it's unfortunate to have people on that watch really not handling business. So I'm, extremely disappointed with what's going on. Hopeful that we'll see better implementation by the company as we go forward. Have to admit, a bit tired here. Sat up for 2 hours playing around with the markets and what's happening in Europe and here, and it's not my best form in terms of where we're at. I've been trying to answer questions as we've been going. A little bit tired, so production values are lacking today. But I really think that if if you're an owner, you might want to consider lightening up by half your portfolio at this point. I think you'll be able to buy back in at a nice discount in the next week or so. And so I just think that it's a tough operating environment with the market crashing for the coronavirus reasons. And I just think that everybody is in a tough position right now. So it's a good time to perhaps sit on the sidelines or use things like puts to cover yourself in a tough situation. Um, uh, exactly. So Curious Stan just made the comment that oil product or consumption will go straight to the floor, and I have to agree with him. So, at any rate, I think I've answered most of the questions I could as we're in show. I'll clip other comments posted on the bottom so that we can all share in that after the show's over. Um, just a reminder, don't forget 25 leg lifts per leg per day with a 5 pound weight. help save your knees, etc. I would also encourage you to consider, don't go to bed within 2 hours of eating, preferably before. Let the food digest so you don't get acid reflux or other issues. I also wanted to encourage you to consider the 5-2 diet or one of the other, sort of fasting diets to help with mental health issues. Any rate, this is Greg for Teslafaninsight. Thanks for joining us this morning. Uh, Juice, vitamin D was just mentioned by Mr. Dang. Great point, thank you. Juice, German au revoir, French Leet Road, Hebrew Choda Hafez, Farsi, um, and Hejdo, Swedish, Strazvice, uh, hello in Russian, Ni hao ma, hello in Chinese. Um, in Jamaica, we say enough respect, walk Woodman. Thank you for joining us. We look forward to your comments as well as our next show if we need to jump in during the day because things are going crazy. We will update you on that. Have a great day. Bye for now. And thank you all for your comments during our live feed this morning.